November 10, 1947. A military barracks courtyard in Charleroi, Belgium. Dawn breaks cold and gray as guards drag a trembling man toward a wooden execution post. Louis Collard, once one of the most powerful Nazi collaborators in Belgium, can barely stand. The man who ordered the massacre of 27 innocent civilians, who directed assassinations of prominent Belgians, who commanded a feared paramilitary brigade, now weeps and begs for mercy that will never come. In moments, a firing squad will end his life, but death won't come quickly. His body will tremble, he will scream in agony, and a final pistol shot to the head will be required to silence him forever. To understand Louis Collard, you must understand the Belgium he was born into. He entered the world on August 9, 1915, in the small industrial town of Ans, located in Wallonia, the French-speaking southern region of Belgium. His birth came during the chaos of the First World War, which had begun just 1 year earlier. German forces occupied much of Belgium, and the nation endured 4 years of hardship, resistance, and suffering before armistice arrived in November 1918. Young Louis grew up amid stories of occupation, sacrifice, and the slow, painful work of reconstruction. The Great War left deep scars on Belgian society. Families mourned their dead, cities rebuilt from rubble. Veterans struggled with wounds visible and invisible. The conflict reshaped Belgium's political landscape, creating divisions between linguistic communities, social classes, and ideological factions that would fester throughout the interwar years. As Collard reached adulthood in the 1930s, Belgium faced new crises. The Great Depression devastated the economy. Unemployment soared. Factories closed. Families lost everything. Social unrest spread through industrial regions like Wallonia, where Collard lived. Fear of communism gripped the middle and upper classes. Traditional political parties seemed incapable of solving mounting problems. In this atmosphere of desperation and anxiety, radical movements offering simple solutions found eager audiences. Among these movements was Rex, founded in the early 1930s by a charismatic young activist named Léon de Grelle. The name derived from Christus Rex, meaning Christ the King, reflecting its origins as a Catholic publishing venture. But Rex quickly evolved beyond religious publishing into a political force combining Catholic traditionalism, fierce nationalism, and authoritarian ideology. De Grelle positioned Rex as the answer to Belgium's problems, calling for moral regeneration, defense of Catholic values, and rejection of what he called corrupt parliamentary democracy. Rex denounced liberalism, communism, and the established political parties with equal fervor. De Grelle's fiery speeches promised a disciplined, unified Belgium, purged of corruption and moral decay. His movement attracted those who felt abandoned by traditional politics: small businessmen threatened by economic collapse, devout Catholics alarmed by secularization, nationalists seeking strong leadership, and young men searching for purpose in uncertain times. In 1936, Rex shocked Belgium's political establishment by winning over 11% of the national vote. Suddenly, de Grelle was a major figure, his movement a force that couldn't be ignored. But success proved fleeting. As de Grelle's admiration for Mussolini and Hitler became increasingly open, moderate Catholics and conservatives who had initially supported Rex withdrew their backing. The Catholic Church hierarchy condemned de Grelle's fascist tendencies. Electoral support collapsed in subsequent elections. Yet for young Louis Collard, Rex's decline didn't diminish his appeal. Intelligent, ambitious, and searching for direction, he found in Rex a sense of purpose that ordinary life in industrial Wallonia couldn't provide. He joined the movement and threw himself into its work with characteristic discipline and precision. His talents lay not in public speaking like de Grelle, but in organization, administration, and behind-the-scenes coordination. Collard worked on propaganda, distribution, and recruitment, helping expand Rex's reach despite its electoral setbacks. His attention to detail, his ability to impose order on chaotic situations, and his absolute devotion to the cause impressed his superiors. He rose steadily through Rex's organizational hierarchy, becoming one of the movement's most capable administrators. When war came, these skills would make him invaluable to both de Grelle and the Nazi occupiers. September 1st, 1939, Nazi Germany invaded Poland, igniting the Second World War. For 8 months, Belgium maintained nervous neutrality, hoping to avoid the catastrophe that had engulfed the nation in 1914. That hope died on May 10, 1940, when German forces struck without warning. Panzer divisions smashed through the Ardennes forest, outflanking Belgian and French defenses. Within 18 days, the Belgian army was shattered. King Leopold III surrendered on May 28th. Belgium fell under Nazi occupation that would last more than 4 years. The occupation transformed Belgian society. German military administration imposed censorship, banned political parties, arrested opponents, and began economic exploitation of the conquered nation. The swastika flew over Brussels. German soldiers patrolled streets where Belgian flags had waved days before. Citizens faced impossible choices: resist and risk death, collaborate and gain advantage, or simply survive by keeping heads down and mouths shut. Léon de Grelle had been arrested by Belgian authorities shortly before the invasion, considered a security risk given his Nazi sympathies. German victory brought his release. Under occupation, de Grelle reorganized Rex with Nazi blessing and support. The movement that had failed at the ballot box would now achieve power through collaboration with foreign occupiers. Rex became one of the primary instruments of Nazi authority in French-speaking Belgium. Louis Collard emerged as one of de Grelle's most trusted lieutenants during the occupation years. His organizational talents proved perfectly suited to the new reality. He took responsibility for propaganda and internal coordination, ensuring Rex's message reached every corner of Wallonia. More significantly, he forged close working relationships with the German security apparatus, particularly the SD, the Nazi intelligence service, and the Gestapo, the feared secret police. These connections made Collard invaluable. He served as bridge between Rex and German occupation authorities, coordinating activities, sharing intelligence, and ensuring smooth cooperation. His ability to impose discipline and order impressed both his Belgian colleagues and German overseers. While de Grelle provided charisma and public face, Collard provided the organizational machinery that made collaboration effective. By 1943, de Grelle made a dramatic decision. He departed for the Eastern Front to fight with the Waffen-SS against the Soviet Union, seeking military glory and Nazi recognition. His absence created a power vacuum within Rex's civilian structure. Victor Mathies assumed nominal leadership as acting national chief. But behind the scenes, Louis Collard effectively controlled Rex's operations in occupied Belgium. Operating from offices in Brussels and Charleroi, Collard oversaw the full range of Rex's collaborative activities. His organization spread Nazi propaganda through newspapers, posters, and public events. It recruited informants who reported on neighbors, colleagues, and family members suspected of resistance sympathies. It participated actively in persecution of Jews and hunting of resistance members. Rex militants under his supervision joined German police raids, arrested dissidents, and enforced occupation laws with enthusiasm that sometimes exceeded their German masters. Collard's most notorious creation was Brigade B, a paramilitary unit within Rex that became synonymous with terror and violence. Brigade B worked directly with German intelligence, conducting surveillance, gathering information on resistance networks, and participating in arrests and interrogations. Its members were responsible for beatings, torture, and murder of Belgian citizens deemed enemies of the occupation. The brigade's violence served multiple purposes. It provided German security services with local knowledge and manpower they lacked. It eliminated resistance members and intimidated potential supporters. It demonstrated Rex's value to Nazi authorities, ensuring continued German support for the movement. And it satisfied the ideological convictions of members who genuinely believed they were defending civilization against communist and democratic degeneracy. Collard also directed intelligence operations that led to assassinations of prominent Belgians. His operatives gathered information on potential targets, their movements, their security arrangements, their vulnerabilities. This information was passed to execution squads who carried out the killings. Among the victims were some of Belgium's most distinguished citizens, industrialists, politicians, lawyers, and academics murdered for opposing collaboration or simply representing institutions the Rexists despised. As 1944 began, the tide of war had turned decisively against Nazi Germany. Allied forces prepared for invasion of Western Europe. Soviet armies pushed westward. Everyone understood that occupation would eventually end. The only questions were when and what would follow. For collaborators like Collard, these questions carried life or death stakes. By summer 1944, Allied forces had landed in Normandy and were advancing through France toward Belgium. Liberation was coming, and everyone knew it. The resistance intensified operations, launching sabotage attacks, assassinating collaborators, and preparing for the occupation's end. German authorities and their Belgian collaborators responded with escalating brutality, determined to maintain control through terror, even as their position crumbled. August 1944 brought this violence to its climax. On August 17th, members of the Belgian resistance ambushed Oswald Engelben, the Rexist mayor of Charleroi, as he traveled with his family. Engelben, his wife, and his son were all killed in the attack. The assassination struck at the heart of Rex's power structure in Wallonia. Engelben had been a prominent collaborator, and his murder represented both resistance capability and determination to punish traitors before liberation arrived. News of the killings enraged the Rexist leadership. Victor Mathies and Louis Collard demanded immediate revenge. Within hours of learning about the assassination, they ordered reprisals against the civilian population. The logic was simple and brutal. If collaborators could be killed, then ordinary Belgians suspected of resistance sympathies would pay the price. Terror would be answered with greater terror. Rexist militiamen descended on the town of Courcelles near Charleroi. They rounded up dozens of civilians based on lists of suspected resistance sympathizers and their families. The victims included teachers, shopkeepers, local officials, and a Catholic priest. Some were known to have resistance connections. Others were simply convenient targets. The militiamen weren't conducting investigations. They were collecting bodies for revenge. Several prisoners were shot that same evening of August 17th, murdered in the immediate fury following news of the Engelben killings. But the violence was only beginning. Throughout the night, more civilians were dragged from their homes and brought to detention points. Families were separated. Prisoners were beaten. The town lived through hours of terror as armed Rexists roamed streets, breaking down doors and seizing anyone they chose. At dawn on August 18th, the remaining prisoners were assembled. What followed was systematic execution. The captives were lined against a wall and shot by firing squad. Men who had committed no crime beyond living in the wrong town, knowing the wrong people, or appearing on lists compiled by informants were murdered in cold blood. In total, 27 Belgian civilians died in the Courcelles massacre. Witness testimony later established that Louis Collard was present throughout and took command of the operation. He didn't merely authorize the killings from a distance. He was there, directing militiamen, overseeing executions, ensuring that revenge was extracted in full. Multiple witnesses saw him giving orders, organizing the roundups, and supervising the firing squads. His fingerprints were on every aspect of the massacre. The Courcelles massacre became one of the most infamous atrocities of the Belgian occupation. It represented collaboration at its most murderous, Belgians killing Belgians in service to foreign occupiers whose defeat was already certain. The victims were ordinary people whose only offense was living in a community where resistance existed. Their deaths served no military purpose. They were pure revenge, collective punishment inflicted on innocents. The massacre also revealed the desperation of collaborators who knew their time was ending. Collard and his fellow Rexists understood that liberation would bring reckoning. Rather than moderating their behavior to avoid prosecution, they escalated violence in final spasm of fanaticism. Perhaps they believed terror could delay the inevitable. Perhaps they simply wanted revenge against a population that had never truly accepted them. Perhaps ideology had consumed whatever humanity they once possessed. Just weeks after the massacre, Allied forces entered Belgium. Brussels was liberated on September 3, 1944. German forces retreated eastward. The occupation was over. Rex collapsed overnight. Members who could flee did so, heading toward Germany with retreating Nazi forces. Those who remained faced immediate arrest in the fury of a liberated population that had endured 4 years of occupation and witnessed atrocities like Corsel. Léon de Grelle escaped to Germany and eventually to Spain, where he lived until 1994, protected by Franco's regime and never facing justice. Victor Mathies and Louis Collard fled together, hoping to reach safety beyond Allied reach. Their flight would take them through collapsing Nazi Germany toward the Austrian Alps, where they hoped neutral Switzerland might offer refuge. The final months of 1944 and early 1945 were chaotic for fleeing collaborators. Louis Collard and Victor Mathies moved through Germany as the Reich crumbled around them. Allied bombers devastated cities, refugees clogged roads. German military police arrested deserters and anyone without proper documentation. The two Belgian collaborators traveled carefully, avoiding attention while seeking escape routes. Their destination was Switzerland, whose neutrality might offer protection from prosecution. But the Swiss had no interest in harboring war criminals. When Collard and Mathies reached the Swiss border, they were turned away. Denied entry to the one neutral country that might have saved them, they fled into the Austrian Alps, hoping to disappear into remote mountain communities until the chaos subsided. Mathies was captured relatively quickly by Allied forces hunting Nazi war criminals and collaborators, but Collard proved more elusive. He managed to evade capture for months, hiding in Austria while Belgian authorities searched for him. He wasn't alone. With him were his wife Huguette and approximately 20 Belgian SS men, fellow collaborators who had fled together and were determined to avoid justice. Belgian intelligence services never stopped hunting major collaborators. The crimes committed during occupation demanded justice, and figures like Collard were too significant to escape. Agents tracked leads across occupied Austria and Germany, following tips from informants, checking refugee camps, and coordinating with Allied occupation authorities. In February 1946, Belgian intelligence agents located Collard in Innsbruck, Austria. He was arrested along with his wife and the SS men hiding with him. By this time, Belgian courts had already tried him in absentia and sentenced him to death. He was wanted as the head of Brigade B and as one of the principal organizers of the Courcelles massacre. Additional charges accused him of orchestrating assassinations of prominent Belgians during the occupation. The victims of these assassinations included Alexandre Galopin, a powerful industrial leader who had resisted Nazi economic demands, François Boves, former Minister of Justice and outspoken opponent of collaboration, Jules Hiernaut, prominent politician and university director, and Louis Breffort, president of the Brussels Bar Association. Each had been targeted for elimination because they represented Belgian institutions and values that Rexist sought to destroy. Collard was returned to Belgium under heavy guard and imprisoned to await trial before the Charleroi War Council. The trials would be the largest war crimes proceedings in Belgian history, involving dozens of defendants and hundreds of witnesses. Collard would face judgment for crimes that had horrified the nation. His first trial focused specifically on the assassination of Jules Hiernaut. Testimony from former Rexists revealed how Collard's intelligence operations had led to the killing. Jean Avar, a former collaborator seeking leniency, told the court that Collard had ordered him to gather information on Belgian Freemasonry to identify targets for assassination. This investigation had led directly to Hiernaut, who was subsequently murdered. Confronted with this testimony, Collard attempted deflection. He claimed he had collected information only for documentation purposes, denying murderous intent. But under pressure, he admitted he had taken responsibility for certain reprisals, such as the Courcelles massacre. This admission, combined with witness testimony, sealed his fate. On March 1, 1946, Collard was sentenced to death for his role in Hiernaut's assassination. But the largest trial was yet to come. On May 21, 1946, in the Salle Concordia in Charleroi, Belgium opened proceedings against 97 defendants charged with participating in the Courcelles massacre. It was the biggest war crimes trial in Belgian history. Leading the accused were Victor Mathies and Louis Collard. Collard appeared in the courtroom thin and tense, wearing a long coat and steel-rimmed spectacles. Prisoner number 55 was pinned to his chest. He had changed from the confident administrator who once commanded Brigade B. Imprisonment had worn him down. The certainty that death awaited had broken something inside him. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: witness testimony from survivors, statements from fellow Rexists seeking reduced sentences, documentary evidence from Rex's own records. 147 witnesses testified over 2 months of proceedings. The picture that emerged was comprehensive and damning. Throughout the trial, Collard adopted strategies of evasion and claimed memory loss. When prosecutors asked about the events of August 17th and 18th, 1944, he muttered that it was absolutely impossible for him to remember anything. He rubbed his forehead repeatedly, projecting confusion and mental deterioration. Whether genuine psychological breakdown or calculated performance, his behavior frustrated prosecutors seeking clear admissions. When confronted with accusations that he had been drunk before ordering the killings, Collard laughed dismissively. He claimed to have only chaotic fragments of memory from those days. His selective amnesia conveniently covered the most incriminating events while allowing him to function normally in other respects. Witnesses contradicted his claims directly. Multiple people testified to seeing Collard commanding operations during the massacre. Some described him carrying petrol cans and setting houses on fire. When confronted with this testimony, Collard responded with mockery rather than denial. He said he didn't remember, but noted there were at least 15 people with him, questioning sarcastically whether he did everything himself and asking what the others were doing. This attitude, mixing claimed amnesia with sarcastic deflection, alienated whatever sympathy might have existed. Collard seemed incapable of showing genuine remorse or even acknowledging the reality of what had happened. Whether from psychological defense mechanisms, genuine dissociation, or simple arrogance, his courtroom demeanor confirmed the impression of a man without conscience. His defense attorney attempted to minimize Collard's role. The lawyer argued that Collard had been merely a secretary, following orders from Matthews and other superiors. He wasn't the leader, just an administrator, implementing decisions made by others. The defense pleaded for mercy, suggesting that Collard's organizational role didn't carry the same moral weight as those who actually pulled triggers. The argument failed completely. Too many witnesses had described Collard giving orders, directing operations, and exercising real command authority. The claim that he was merely a secretary contradicted years of evidence showing him as one of Rex's most powerful figures. His own admissions about taking responsibility for Courcelles undermined any attempt to portray him as a minor functionary. On August 3, 1946, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the Charleroi War Council announced its verdict. Both Victor Matthews and Louis Collard were sentenced to death by firing squad. The judgment recognized their roles as principal organizers of the massacre, responsible for the murder of 27 innocent Belgian civilians. The verdict surprised no one. The evidence was overwhelming, the crimes undeniable. Belgian public opinion demanded maximum punishment for those responsible for Corsels and similar atrocities. The War Council delivered what the nation expected: death for the architects of mass murder. Following his sentence, Collard's mental state deteriorated further. While awaiting execution, he attempted suicide but survived. He alternated between moments of arrogance, insisting on his importance to historical events, and periods of despair, recognizing that death was approaching and nothing could prevent it. He spent his final months isolated in a small cell, waiting for the execution date that would end his life at 32 years old. November 10, 1947. Dawn approached over Charleroi. In a military barracks courtyard, preparations were underway for mass execution. 27 Rexist collaborators would die that morning, a number matching exactly the victims of the Courcelles massacre. Whether this symmetry was deliberate or coincidental, it carried unmistakable symbolic weight. Louis Collard was placed in the first group, scheduled for 7:30 a.m. The hours before execution were filled with final rituals. A Catholic priest visited condemned prisoners, offering confession and last rites to those who wanted them. Final meals were provided, last cigarettes were smoked, letters to families were written and collected. Collard spent his final night in anguish. Whatever arrogance he had displayed during trial had evaporated completely. He faced death not with the defiance of a true believer, but with the terror of a man who desperately wanted to live. When guards came to prepare him for execution, he begged for mercy. He pleaded for his life to be spared. He offered anything, promised anything, if only the sentence could be delayed or commuted. Nothing could save him. The verdict was final. The execution would proceed. After smoking his last cigarette, Collard appeared pale and utterly exhausted. The condemned man who had once commanded feared paramilitary units could barely stand. Guards had to physically carry him to the execution post. His legs wouldn't support him. His body had surrendered before the bullets arrived. Because of his former military status within Rex's paramilitary structure, protocol required ceremonial stripping of rank before execution. The insignia were torn from his coat while the formal order was read aloud. This ritual humiliation preceded death, marking him as dishonored before he was destroyed. A priest stood beside the post, offering final absolution. Collard wept quietly, his earlier begging reduced to tears and whispered prayers. Whatever faith he possessed, whatever hope for divine mercy remained, he clung to it in those final moments. The priest made the sign of the cross over the condemned man. A red cloth was pinned to Collard's chest, marking the target for the firing squad. The soldiers raised their rifles. The commanding officer raised his sword, the traditional signal. At exactly 7:36 a.m., the rifles fired. Collard slumped forward against his restraints. But death didn't come cleanly. His body trembled violently. He screamed in agony, the bullets having failed to kill instantly. The priest stepped closer, offering final absolution to a man still dying. The sounds of his suffering filled the courtyard. A gendarmerie officer drew his pistol, stepped forward, and fired a single bullet into Collard's head. The coup de grace silenced him forever. Louis Collard, aged 32, organizer of massacres and architect of terror, was dead. 26 more collaborators died that morning in Charleroi. The executions continued in groups throughout the day. Each faced the same firing squad, the same courtyard, the same final ritual. Belgium was settling accounts with those who had betrayed it during occupation. If you found this documented history compelling, this channel examines collaborators, war criminals, and justice from World War II. Subscribe, share with those who value historical truth, and comment with topics you want explored. Until next time, remember that collaboration has consequences. Those who serve foreign occupiers against their own people may prosper temporarily, but justice often arrives. Louis Collard's screams in that Charleroi courtyard echo his warning: betrayal of your nation, murder of your countrymen, service to totalitarian evil. These crimes will be remembered and punished. The executed are gone, but history preserves their shame forever.